Hi, and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. Today, we are talking all about self-doubt and tackling that niggling, critical inner voice that says, I'm no good, I'm going to fail, I can't do this, they're not going to like me, or simply, I don't know who I am and what I'm good at. We're going to be sharing what we believe is the origin of this issue, how your inner child is involved now as an adult, and what you can do to become more self-assured and trusting in yourself and your abilities. Okay, David, so this is a topic and a question we've had several times from members of our Facebook community. They're asking, I was heavily criticized as a child, and I also got into a habit of seeking validation and approval from my parents, teachers, and other adults when I was a child. But now, as an adult myself, I can see I am repeating this pattern. I'm criticizing myself, so I'm doing a lot of the CCJ, as we call it, and I'm also gravitating towards codependent relationships where my partner is telling me what to do, I'm relying on them to make decisions for me and to tell me I'm good enough. I want to break this cycle. I want to know who I am. I want to trust my abilities and my judgments and decisions. I don't want to be looking to other people all the time. Where do I begin and what do I need to do?
Okay. So it's like looking in at one of my sessions. This is exactly the type of thing I work with my clients with as every day. So let me look at the global picture and then I show you how you can do it. So the global picture is very interesting. In the Wu Wei wisdom process model, I call this the flip. So as you see, the person's developed a story, very involved story, and then at the end, they flipped it over to me and say, what do I do? And this is what I call the flip. I say to them, let's find out what you are already doing, rather than me telling you what you should be doing, because that's not my role. You're an absolutely awesome, fantastic, intelligent, divine, spiritual person that's making a choice already to do something. So let's first of all find out what you're doing, why you're doing it. You see, once you can get it into the model, it works really well. What are you doing and why are you doing it? And where it goes wrong is people look at other people and say, tell me what to do. Tell me how I change. And can I give you one piece of guidance? If you're doing this, whatever anybody tells you, it will not work, because you will revert back to what you've been doing. The way to change it is to discover and be accountable, be responsible for what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Okay, so am I correct in thinking that you're saying this lady says I'm criticizing myself, I'm attracted towards codependent relationships, these are bad habits, and she's asking what are the ABCD steps I need to do to stop doing this? And what you're saying is no, because even if I give you the ABCD steps, layer those on top of your existing habits, it's not going to solve the habits. You're saying we've got to look at the origin and the reason and the rationale for those habits that she's already identified.
That you're already doing.
Yeah,
that's the key. That's the key. You are already proactively doing something. Yeah. You are choosing, and that's why in other videos I don't like the word habit, because all of these words take away your responsibility and your accountability. I can't help it, David. It's just a habit. It's something I've been doing all of my life. It's ingrained. You see, you have all of these very strong words that keep you on that path. But that path is a path that you've chosen. That's the key. And that's why we call it the flip. What you've been subconsciously doing, or your inner child has been doing, is putting that onto other people. Oh, if it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for this, if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for the way they said this. So all of the time you are releasing your accountability and putting it onto someone else. That's why I call it the flip. You have to flip it back and take accountability and ask yourself, why am I doing this?
Okay, David, but I want to pick you up on something there, because you said I'm choosing this. But I didn't choose. If I'm this individual, I did not choose as a child to be constantly criticized by my parents or teachers. I didn't choose as a child for them to be constantly negatively judging what I did and telling me what to do. I didn't choose that childhood environment, but
That's a very powerful question, Alex. Thank you, because that is what nearly all of my clients will say, and I will agree with you. If this is you, what Alex has just said and spoken on your behalf, I agree with you. As a child, you did not choose that environment. Let me repeat that. As a child, you did not choose that environment. That is your journey. That is the environment that you came through. And I also accept 100%. As a child, you couldn't address or quantify or deal with that scenario with critical parents, critical siblings, critical bad parenting or bad teaching. But you're not a child now. And you can deal with it now. And it's that part of your mind that's stuck. Remember, we've talked about this kernel. That part of your mind is stuck in that scenario of being critical, of being criticized. And that becomes familiar. Even though it doesn't work, it becomes familiar. And some of my clients will even use a word like easier. It's easier to criticize myself because I'm used to it. And then they'll give me the word, oh, it's a habit. Oh, it's ingrained. Oh, it's deep in my subconscious. Oh, it's not my responsibility. So there has to be a time from a child when you couldn't deal with it, and I accept that, but you still came through it, didn't you? And so you can't tell me you can't cope, because the evidence is you have coped. You always will cope. We are only talking about the style in which you cope. So you came through it, but you are not that child now. You are a spiritual being. You have an appropriateness and an authenticity to look back and educate that part of your mind in the correct way to view those situations.
Okay, David. So you've acknowledged the fact that if I'm this individual, my childhood upbringing wasn't great.
Dysfunctional. Absolutely.
It didn't teach me to be self-assured, to self-refer, to understand and grow and learn and get a grip on my own abilities and make decisions for myself.
So can I just tell you, if you was my client telling me that, and I would say, thank goodness, you cannot tell me now you're not good enough. You cannot tell me you can't cope. And you cannot tell me you have no worth. Because if Alex is role playing that role, look what she's just told me. She has now come through a dysfunctional childhood, teaching circumstances, physical, personal, but she's come through it. Then you can't turn around and tell me you're not good enough, because the evidence is you have come through it.
But what about for everyone who says, yes, okay, David, I can understand that you're saying now as an adult, it's my responsibility not to criticize myself. It's my responsibility to make sound judgments and to self-refer. However, if we're acknowledging that I had a dysfunctional childhood, surely we need to acknowledge that it's almost like I have an emotional handicap now, because
no.
But the thinking being that, you know, if every decision was made for me, if I was told what I should be doing, shouldn't be doing, what I was good at, what I wasn't good at, if I was judged and criticized all along. My total understanding of who I am and my capabilities has been informed by other people. I have no sense of who I am now. So that's a kind of, it's almost like I've got a handicap in terms of starting this journey now, what you're talking about, breaking the cycle, taking self-responsibility. Is that not the case?
That's absolutely not the case. Absolutely no, no, no. If you recognize what Alex has just said and you say that to yourself, this is what I call a lie. This is a lie. Can I tell you why it's a lie? Because if what Alex is role playing is the truth, you would be doing exactly the same to your physical children. And you don't. In fact, you do the opposite. You may even overcompensate for your physical children. And that's telling me that you have the knowledge. You have the authentic knowledge that you are a spiritual person because you're making a different choice. And this is what we call the dual belief system. Is this you? I have one belief for you and one belief for other people. And this is where it goes wrong. And you hop. This is why the accountability is so important. You hop between the two belief systems and say, well, it's different for me. Oh, well, I think that, and as Alex says, well, I'm emotionally disabled. I hear this every day. This is not true. You are not emotionally disabled because, let's all say this together, you create your emotions. How can you be emotionally disabled from an emotion that you are creating? It doesn't make sense. It's like saying there's such a thing as a square circle or a married bachelor. This does not make sense. It's incoherent. You cannot be absolutely impossible to be disabled about emotions that you are creating. What you're doing is your belief system about you has been corrupted from, as Alex says, from your childhood. Now it's your responsibility to adapt that, but you've already done it. You've already done it for other people. You've already done it for your physical children, for your family, for those at work. You think about those differently than you think about yourself. So you can't say to me, I don't know how to do it. A lot of my clients do. I don't know how to love myself, David. This is what I heard just yesterday. David, you don't understand. I don't know how to create a feeling of love for myself. I just ask him the same thing. Do you create a feeling of love for your son? And she says, yes, of course I do. I love him with all of my heart. I said, well, why don't you do the same for you? And she said, well, it's different for me. Dual belief system. Dual belief system straight away. And that's what the Wu Wei wisdom model is all about. Bringing those two separate into a oneness. And that's what we're talking about.
And so I kind of like how you described it there, David. So rather than thinking it's some sort of inherent flaw that we now have for the rest of our life, it's more about updating our belief system, updating our emotional skill set, and emotionally educating that part of us, that our inner child, which is still stuck in the childhood ways of thinking.
I think it's a bit deeper than that, Alex, because I don't think it's about re-educating. I think it goes down to a spiritual understanding about it's either true. If it's true for your physical child, then it has to equally be true for you. Unless you give me a get out of jail that it's not true for you. If you believe your physical child is worthy, beautiful, loving, can cope, all of those things, then it has to apply to you. You can't create that separation. So it's not like you have to learn something. You've already know how to do it. You have to apply it to yourself and then find out why you're not applying it to you.
So that was my next question. Why is it that we can see our child or look at a friend or a peer of ours and see they're capable, they can manage, they're good enough, but yet we can still automatically on this kind of default judge ourselves negatively, question our own decisions, question our own abilities? Why do we have this kind of dual belief system? Has that got something to do with the inner child?
That's absolutely the inner child. Remember, on all of the videos, I've said to you, the inner child is not a monster. It's not a demon. It's not evil. It's not out to get you. It's not out to mess up your life, screw up your relationships. It's a child that's stuck. And as I agreed with Alex, when you were a child, you were hoping to get good counsel and guidance and emotional education, love, and all of the things that children should get. But really ask yourself, how many of us really get that? I know a lot of my clients will say, oh, yes, but look at my friends. And yes, but that's the mask. How many of us really get that Disney World, utopian type of childhood? I would say few of us, not many of us. We all have to go through a journey. And this is your journey of development into a spiritual being. But the problem is that part of your mind is very powerful. And she or he is locked down. And she's very willful about how she believes things should have been, what's right and wrong. Remember, we've done lots of videos on this. Please, if this is you, look back at the resources. We talk about this in great detail. That inner child part of your mind is about right, wrong, just, unjust, fair, unfair. And so it sees things through the lens of this. That's why you can't move on, because everything that happens to you goes through this lens. When it's about your physical child, it goes through a different lens. And that's why your education for your physical child is completely different to your education of yourself. It's black and white, the dual belief system.
Okay, so if I was criticized as a child, why am I now still criticizing myself as an adult in terms of that model you've just said, in terms of this inner child lens?
So that's going down on a different level. Now, if we get to that level, and Alex as a client asked me that, we have to find out why. Is it because you want to prove that your parents were correct, that children want to honor and respect their parents? So is it that you say, well, okay, you were right. There is something wrong with me. I can't criticize you. I've already taken responsibility for what you're saying. Or is it the flip? You almost want to prove your parents wrong, or that they see that they were wrong. See, it gets a little bit more complicated now. So stick with me. So this was a client just last week who is absolutely unmerciful. He punishes himself so badly. It's even for me doing this job for nearly 45 years, I couldn't believe the way he emotionally and spoke about himself. And when we got down to it, what his plan was, if my parents see me so distraught, so in a hospital, laid up, ill, and I can say this is all down to you, they will realize their mistake and they will correct it. So it's a little bit more complicated, and it will be for the individual. That's why I think doing a session with somebody can be helpful, because it gives me a chance as a third person to review their little kind of nuances, how they've dealt with that, or actually how they've not dealt with that. That's the problem. And then everybody kind of views it through a different view. That's why I love about my work and working with clients so much, because you get a chance to see all these little nuances of what they're doing.
So actually, I mean, it's almost like an extra layer of what's going on here, because yes, of course, the first thing to say is identify what you're doing, identify, well, this is because I was also criticized as a child. So it's a habit. I'm constantly making the choice. But there's, as you said, there's another layer of complexity on this, because there's also in essence, what you've talked about there is like a payoff for the inner child. There's a payoff either because I want to prove my parents right, and I'm going to keep on criticizing myself because I don't want to question my parents' judgment of me, or I'm going to punish my parents by constantly criticizing myself and making myself ill, and then they'll be sorry. So it's like the inner child is layered on top another level of manipulation, complexity, and emotional games, really.
And now this is what we call the maze of confusion. So let me give you another layer that the inner child will lay there. Now I have someone to blame. Now, if things in my life don't go right, if I'm a failure, then I can say to myself, not to other people, but to myself in my inner child, well, it's not my fault, is it? It's my parents' fault. So you can see, and I don't know, I'll have to sit and count. There must be about 6 layers of confusion here that people can do to complicate it. And I think that's where the only level that I can help is when we've gone through and we've found these complicated layers, and sometimes it's a layer on top of a layer on top of a layer that we use as a way not to be accountable, as I said at the top of the show, not to be responsible, but a way to blame other people so that they are not CCJ'd. They are not compared to other people. They are not criticized, and they are not being judged. And that's what they're trying to avoid. That's what the inner child is trying to avoid. And we could talk for 2 hours of all the little complications and the nuances, but you already know this, don't you? I'm just broad brushing, but you know how you've taken it and developed it for yourself. But ask yourself, is it the truth? Would I teach this to my physical child? And that's why we try and make it simple. Ask yourself, the way you speak to yourself, the way you view yourself, the way you refer to yourself, the way you criticize, judge, and compare yourself, would you do that to your physical child? And if the answer is no, then you've fallen into the trap.
Yeah. So what you're saying is actually it's not about learning how to stop criticizing myself, because you already know how to not criticize, because you're quite capable and you're already doing it for your own child or young person you know, or your friends. You're not judging them, criticizing them, calling them out in the same way you call yourself out. So you know that it's not a skill that needs to be learned.
No.
The solution is questioning why you're still choosing to do it. And as you say, yes, of course, you can identify that it was a learned behavior, but that is no excuse for not doing it now. So you need to stop and interrogate a little bit more deeply in the way that you've talked about there.
So that's what we call the golden thread. Yeah. So we started the emotions, why. We've demonstrated the golden thread in many videos. We go back and we find it. So one of the questions is, because your parents said it, let's just say your parents took you to one side one day, sat you on the kitchen table and said, Mummy and Daddy believe you're not good enough. Does that make it true? And then a lot of people say, well, they didn't actually say that, but I kind of gathered that information. But I said, if they did that, does that make it true? And they said, well, probably not, because that's the key. Ask yourself, do you believe everything your parents have told you? Do you follow your parents rigidly? If they told you how to have your hair, what clothes to wear, what to do, what to eat, what not to eat, are you still doing that? Then why are you still following that? Because this is the maze of confusion. Because there is a benefit in this with you. My goodness, you're not going to like what I'm going to say you now. There is a benefit in it for you. It's a perverse benefit, else you wouldn't do it. And as Alex says, you don't have to learn how not to do it. You have to do the flip. You have to learn, why am I doing it? That's the key. That's the breakthrough. That's the enlightenment. That shifts the responsibility onto you. This is what I'm choosing to do. I'm choosing to doubt myself. I'm choosing to beat myself up. I'm choosing to be hard on myself. Why? Why? And then you can do that for yourself.
So the typical benefits would be what, in terms of the inner child payoffs, inner child benefits?
Well, the typical inner child is they take away the accountability. They are now not responsible. In your own mind, you have someone to shift the blame onto. If it wasn't for them, if that hadn't have happened to me, if it wasn't for my dysfunctional childhood, if it wasn't that my parents, here comes another layer, just come to my mind. My parents did not meet my expectations. Have you said that? My parents were not as good as my friends' parents. You said something like that. You see, there's lots of layers here. So this is why the golden thread process will help you to identify. And this is something you can do for yourself. You can write it down. You don't have to be with anybody. You can write it down. Don't need a therapist. You can write it down. You may need somebody just to help the little bit of the confusion because you're so used to doing it. You haven't got that directness that sometimes my clients like, but I've got to be honest, sometimes my clients don't like because I try and be very direct. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? Why do you believe that? Where's the evidence? Give me the evidence. Not the result of thinking it. What's the evidence? Where did it come from? Remember that thing that I say on the videos? Where's the fountainhead?
Yeah.
Where's the first instance? You was not born, you did not come into this world not being good enough or being unable to cope
Or doubting yourself.
or doubting yourself. So you've learned it.
Yeah.
You've learned it. Now you've got to go back to where did I learn it from? Is the source of that learning something that I can trust?
Exactly. And also not to just use the excuse of, well, it's learned behavior as the reason you're still doing it. So you're saying, yes, definitely identify where it came from. The original fountainhead point at which I began to doubt myself, I began to believe I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't capable, that I couldn't cope. Identify that, question that to make sure it's the truth rather than a childhood misinterpretation. But then if you are still doing it, you need to work out what's the payoff.
What's the payoff?
Why?
Exactly.
If I know this is wrong, if I know this is unhealthy, if I want to stop doing this, why am I still doing it? If I cannot criticize my child, if I cannot criticize my friends, why am I choosing to still criticize myself? There is a perverse payoff here. And we've talked about a few of those inner child manipulations and payoffs.
Well explained. And you see, it's that directness that you have to sit quietly with yourself in what I would call a meditation. Remember, my definition of a meditation is the ability to focus your mind and just go through those stages. There's lots of help here in our Facebook community will help you on the resources of these YouTube videos, how to do this. Keep it simple. Do not overcomplicate it. Remember, you are already doing it. You are doing it for your physical child, as Alex has just explained. Just put yourself on equal on your physical child and then go through and don't look at the outcomes. Look at why you created that. So as Alex says, well, I'm not good enough because my parents told me I'm not good enough. Then we have to look at the authority of your parents. Do they know everything? Are you following them and every word they've ever said to you? And then here comes another layer. So he just thought of another layer. Well, it's a belief, David. It's ingrained. I can't change it. That's wrong. You change your beliefs all of the time. All of the time. Since you've been watching these videos, you've changed your beliefs about things. So do not use that as the excuse. Oh, it's just my belief, David, and I can't change it. You can't change your beliefs, can you? Yes, of course you can. Change your beliefs all of the time. And if you're holding a false belief, then you have to take responsibility for that false belief. You have to be accountable. You have to say, David, this is a false belief. I know it's absolutely crap, but I'm going to keep on holding it. And that's your choice. That's what you're doing. And so that's the process. You've got to go through that golden thread. You've got to keep it simple. You've got to be kind of direct with yourself, candid. Don't let the inner child. Your inner child's a master at creating confusion. It will send you off on all of the different directions. You've got to be very focused to go through and find the root of that.
And just to kind of recap, kind of where we started on this particular side is that what you're saying is, if you are knowing you've got the false belief, if you're still choosing to hold on to it, then there's no way that anyone can give you
No
a
way.
1, 2, 3 ABC steps
way.
to overcome it if you're still going to choose to hold on to the belief.
No
You've
way.
got to get rid of the belief. It's the belief is causing the problem.
That's the
No
whole thing.
amount of affirmations, positive self-care, reading spiritual books, self-help books are going to make any difference to your negative self-talk if you're still holding on to the lie, the belief within your belief system.
And you're holding on to it for a benefit, for a reason, for a payoff. You've got to identify that benefit. I would say perhaps 100% of my clients, when I tell them that, they look in horror. They go, "You're joking. There is no benefit, none, zero. It's wrecking my life." But you're doing it. So there must be a benefit because nobody's making you do it. When you were a child, probably you could say somebody was making me do it because they'd hit me, beat me, abuse me. But they're not doing that now. And guess who's doing that right now? You are. So you have become that person to yourself. And that's where you've got to stop. And the way you stop it is truth, honesty, and integrity. Look in the mirror and speak truthful. Don't go down those kind of twisty roads where you get yourself lost and then you go, "Oh, it's too complicated. Let's give up."
So the other half of the question was, first off, I want to break the habit of criticizing myself, but also I want to break the habit of gravitating into codependent relationships where I'm constantly looking to the other person for validation or to tell me what to do or to reassure me my decisions are right. Do the same principles of what we've just talked about with the self-criticism apply to this as well, the codependency?
Exactly the same principles, Alex, because all you're doing is looking for somebody else as to be a kind of a golden parent. You're thinking, well, this will be solved if I find that right partner, if I find that right company, if I find that right boss that treats me in the way, in this utopian Disney World way, then my world's going to be wonderful. It's going to be the way that I expect it should be. And you're putting the responsibility onto someone else. And of course, they never meet your criteria. They never meet your expectations. They will never be successful. So after a while, then you start criticizing them. Then you find fault in them. So it's all the time looking externally. And haven't we done many videos on this together? Haven't I shared this teaching with you? Everything you need is internal, not external. And if you're constantly looking external, where you blamed your parents, you're now looking external for someone else to come sailing in on a parachute or what I call an emotional fairy godmother or godfather to wave their wand and sort out all your emotions, put your life in order, and then you'll live happily ever after. And that's why I call it a story. It is like a fairy story where you're the prince or the princess and you walk the road and everybody falls down around you and you get what you want and everybody's happy, and that's the story. But that's not reality. And that's why it will never work. And if you've fallen into the codependency trap, ask yourself, if you look at the word validation, it means value. Ask yourself, why do I think someone else can value me more than I value me? Does that make sense to you? That someone else who just comes into your life has a better sense of value of you as a human spiritual being than you have of you? This to me is a square circle. It's nonsensical again.
And I can see how this now touches very heavily on the self-criticism issue, because if we are used to criticizing our own thoughts, our own judgments, our own abilities, then we are naturally going to default and look to someone else to tell us what to think, what to do, what to choose, whether we're okay. But if we can stop the self-criticism habit, which is the first thing we talked about, then why would you want to look to somebody else? So actually, the codependency issue really rests on the self-criticism and the self-doubt
But
issue.
it even gets more complicated than that. See, if you take that layer off and look at the next layer. So let's say you find somebody who, oh my God, they're so much in love with you. They adore you. They tell you that you're wonderful. They're there at your beck and call. Do you believe them?
No.
No.
Because if you have the self-doubt, if you have the self-criticism in place, if you have that belief that you know is wrong, but you're still choosing to hold on to it, they could be the best person in the world. They could tell you every moment of every day that they love you, that you're good enough, that you can cope, but you wouldn't believe it.
I say to my clients, they could rip out their heart and hand it over to you, and you'd say, that's a bit too red. You would still not be happy. You are on the carousel of despair because what you're looking for is unattainable outside of you, only inside of you, internally. It is your job, your responsibility. You have to be accountable for nurturing, loving, and connecting to that spiritual side of you that makes you what I believe you are, an awesome human being. Not perfect, but awesome, trying your best, learning your lessons. This is your unique journey. No one shares your journey. No one shares your story. But I have absolute faith in you that you will learn, else you wouldn't be watching our videos. It's as simple as that. You'll be on another journey. This is your journey and you can make a difference. And only you can make that difference.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. What I really hope you've enjoyed this teaching, that it has given you a fresh perspective on this issue of self-doubt and self-criticism and also codependent relationships. I will put lots more teaching links in the show notes, so do check those out. So in terms of relationship stuff, in terms of understanding more about the golden thread process, and also in terms of understanding our teachings on the inner child and working with your inner child. If you have enjoyed this teaching, please do comment below and share it with someone else who you think may also benefit. David works every week with clients all over the world, one-to-one by Zoom video call. And if you'd like to learn more about David's sessions, check out the show notes as well. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new videos every week and we'd love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.